The creative side of coding, I think, doesn't go away. I think, if anything, programmers get even more leverage and more powerful. And rather than computing replacing programmers use AI to replace everybody else.
On Tesla versus Waymo, would you bet on software or hardware for self-driving?
Yeah, so I think Tesla's in the stronger, longer-term position, but it's hard to argue with what's working right now, and Waymo is working right now, so I would not underestimate them, because there's a learning curve that you go through when you actually deploy something, and Waymo is way ahead in that regard, but Tesla's camera-only approach, if it works, is a superior. It's much more scalable, and Tesla knows how to print cars, right? They can just mass manufacture cars. But I think they'll both be around. They'll both be fine. It's everybody else who doesn't have a self-driving vehicle that's screwed.
You mentioned kids there, and you had a tweet that said, "I'm not convinced that declining fertility needs to be proactively fought."
I forgot that one.
You're going to have to... I dug deep. Why?
Well, I mean, think back. Like, what was it, 30 years ago, 20 years ago? Everybody was saying overpopulation of the earth is going to be a problem, Malthusian ending, we're going to have too many people, and all of a sudden we're going to have too few people. So part of it is just the doomerism meme is always alive and well, right?
It just gets repackaged.
Yeah, we're running out of oil. We have too much oil, right? You know, it's like the world is cooling, the world is warming. Like, there's always something to scream about the world is ending. There's no progress in technology. AI is going to blow up the world, right? So people tend to overdo in both directions. Now, what is the actual fertility problem, right? Well, people are having less kids. Are they having less kids because there's a disease? Was there a virus? Did they lose their fertility? Is it microplastics in the testicles, right? No, it's people are having less kids because they're choosing to have less kids, right? Women have gotten emancipation and independence in the workforce, and they're making more money. People don't need kids as an insurance policy, so they have less kids. Maybe they're living hedonistic lives. God bless them, right? They want to have more fun. They want to have less kids. I don't see the act of choosing to have less kids as a problem. Okay, so let's move one level up. It's because of the retirees. It's because a large percentage of the population is essentially retiring at the guaranteed age of 65 or 70, thanks to Social Security. And so they need other people to pay for it. They need more workers in the workforce. And if the workforce is shrinking, then you have a small number of people exactly who are supporting a large number of retirees. And in democracies, you can't take pensions away. The voters vote you out. So they slowly strangle the economy. So what do? Then you have a bunch of immigration, and then the whole culture changes. You end up in a low trust society, and people start fighting over limited resources, and how do you control which immigrants come in, and how do you make sure that they're good taxpayers after they're in, and so on. So you end up with in kind of this trap where the low fertility rate is upstream of the downstream problems that are cultural and societal. But I'm not sure that you're going to solve that by making people have more kids. How are you going to meme them into having more kids? And I'm not even sure it's necessarily a problem, because keep in mind, you have more resources now. You have less of a burden. Now, there's a flip side where every kid is a lottery ticket and an invention. So there's some benefit to having more kids, but you can't force it. I think it'll work itself out, right? The Scott Adams has this great law, which is called the Adams law of slow-moving disasters. Okay. When disasters are very slow-moving, like peak oil or global warming or population collapse, and everyone can kind of see them coming, economics and society as a force solve them, because enough individual people has incentives to go solve them. So I don't know exactly how it gets solved, but I think it could get solved in various ways. One example could be, maybe people retire later. Maybe AI and automation and robots take care of the older people. Maybe we figure out how to have immigrants while still keeping a high trust society. We kind of put more rules around immigration that protect some of the high trust benefits. Maybe we outsource more things. Maybe we just, have more land and housing to go around. Believe me, if we were having too many kids, everyone would be complaining about how there's no housing and there's no land, right? So they'll always find something to care about. So I just don't view this as like a thing that any individual or government action is going to solve. I think economics and incentives over time will solve it. And I'm not even convinced it's like that big of a problem.
Is there anything that you do think is sufficient?
It may be self-correcting too, which is that if there are too few kids in society, and the returns to having kids literally might just go up. It might just be easier to have
the incentive
kids.
To now have a child because there's so few around. They're going to get the best job.
They're going to have the best
most
jobs,
opportunity.
the best resources. Like everyone's happy.
I suppose
to see
if you could come at it from a pain side, which is you look at all of the other people around who don't have kids. Let's say that pensions completely drop off, and the only way that old people are able to survive is if their children pay them some sort of stipend, like reverse, send money back up the generations. You go, okay, well, that's a pretty fucking good incentive.
That's a good incentive. I also think that people have been memed into thinking that kids make your life worse, and that's a pretty bad.
What's your experience been?
kids make your life better in every possible way. If you want an automatic built-in meaning to life, have kids. And I think there are these bad psych studies, like most psych studies, unfortunately, that say that people are unhappy when they have kids. Yeah, it's because you're catching them in the middle of changing a diaper and you're saying, like, are you glad you had kids or not? Or they don't even say that. They say, are you happy or not? And they say, no, I'm not happy right now. But what they don't realize is that person has found something more important than being happy in the moment. They found meaning, and the meaning comes from kids. And if you ask parents, do you regret having kids? I think it would be 99-1 against, it would be, no, I don't regret having kids. I love having kids. I'm so glad I had kids. It's incredibly rare to meet a parent that regretted having children.
It's pretty good odds.
It's extremely good odds. And I think a lot of people get late into life, and then they can't admit that they didn't want kids, that they should have had kids. It's kind of late in the game. But a lot of times you see everybody who has a pet, right? And they're pushing them around in a stroller, right? What is that? That's a sublimated desire for children.
Yeah, Malcolm Collins says that having a pet is to children as using porn is to sex. He basically thinks that it's sort of a surrogate.
It's definitely in that direction.
Yeah.
And
I don't have.
I like pets. I like animals. But I don't like the idea of like neutering or spaying something and then keeping it as a prisoner in the house and having to train it. It's just, I don't want to be responsible for that.
Given that you've been thinking more about child rearing kids, what do you hope that your kids learn from their childhood?
They should just be happy and do what they want. I don't have particular goals in mind for them. I think that's another route to unhappiness. That's
different though, right? Than learn versus goals. It's not necessarily what do they want. What do you want them to want out of life? Like, what is it that you had that idea around? Your number one job as a parent is to provide unconditional love to your kids.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Right. So I can be loved, or I am loved unconditionally. Is that one of the things?
I want my kids to feel unconditionally loved, and I want them to have high self-esteem. As a consequence of that. But I don't get to choose any. All I get to choose is my output. I can output love. I can't choose what they feel. I can't choose how they behave. I can't choose what they want. I can't choose what they turn out to be.
And downstream from that, there should be freedom. There should be a degree of freedom that comes from the self-esteem, that comes from the unconditionality. Yeah,
they should make their own mistakes and learn their own lessons and have their own desires and fulfill them as is appropriate. Like any parent, I wouldn't want them to be hurt. I wouldn't want them to be unhappy, but I cannot control these things.
You replied to my friend Rob Henderson. He was talking about how kids fall asleep more quickly when they're being carried. And you said, cry it out and co-sleeping is dangerous. What's IYI science?
IYI is Nassim Taleb. He talks about intellectual yet idiot. These are people who are overeducated and they deny like basic common sense.
Okay.
So there's a lot of that goes on in child rearing, thanks to really bad studies and bad public medical directives. So, for example, a few parents, maybe they're drunk or they're high or they're just other issues, and they roll over their kid when they're sleeping, the kid suffocates, or they neglect their kid, and then
is that what co-sleeping's having them in the bed?
Yeah, exactly. Or they're the modern proclamation, and so because of that, they say, well, don't co-sleep with your kids. Well, the kids in every society through all of human history co-slept with their parents. Where else do you think they were sleeping? They weren't houses with multiple rooms.
We'll put them in the other tent.
Yeah, exactly. We'll put them in the other tent. It's just nonsense. Co-sleeping has been around since the dawn of time. So has feeding kids cow milk or goat milk when breast milk runs out or is not available. Yet we're told formula, made with soy and corn syrup, which was invented recently, is somehow better than cow milk, and cow milk can be dangerous for your kids, and co-sleeping is dangerous for your kids, and cry it out is the right answer. All of that is nonsense. I mean, it's very clear that we raise children throughout human history without these interventions. And to me, the idea that like you're going to let your kid cry it out, I get why that's done for practical reasons, so that you can get some sleep and you can go to work in the morning. But the reality is, when you let the kid cry it out, you're letting the kid bawl until it finally gives up. I mean, a kid left by itself to cry it out in the wild is going to get eaten, right? It's going to get eaten by a tiger. So this kid is starting off on the wrong foundation. The one I mentioned earlier about the idea that babies don't feel pain, like that's ludicrous, right?
I've never heard that before. Yeah. That's such a wild idea.
I'm not saying that's 100% true. I read it
on... Poke a child in the cheek quite hard and see if it doesn't feel
That's in the category of I read it on Twitter, and I did 1 level confirmation on it, but it's so ludicrous that I should probably do 2 or 3 level confirmations on it before I talk about it. But there are definitely some people who believe that. There are enough that it was a thing in certain circles for a while. But I think we just go through these, these IYI beliefs, these intellectual idiot beliefs come from people who take a little bit of knowledge and extrapolate it too far. They think we know more than we know due to recent scientific studies, and these are junk science. These are low power studies on on very certain contexts that then get over applied. Behavioral psych is very guilty of this, but it's true across a lot of science. So even with science, you have to be skeptical. You have to look very carefully at, does it apply in the right context or not? Does it come from good sources? Did they run enough high-powered studies that are widely accepted? And there are a whole bunch of things you're just not supposed to talk about. You're not supposed to say, like, you don't say, like, you can't say anything negative about vaccines because, God forbid, what if they don't get the polio vaccine, right? And that's part of the reason why the recent vaccine debate, because we've taken our worship for vaccines too far, because we don't want people to not take non-essential vaccines. So it gets overdone. So the same way, there's this whole SIDS thing, sudden infant death syndrome, right? I was like, no, kids don't suddenly mysteriously die. Like, more likely there was neglect or there was a problem, and then whoever was the caretaker doesn't want to admit to the problem or didn't recognize the problem. But kids don't just spontaneously die in the crib, right? So they talk about swaddling babies. You swaddle babies, basically tie them up, mummify them, so you constrict them so they don't die of SIDS where they roll over and they can't get back. I mean, it's just all this craziness around child raising.
It's a real minefield.
It's a minefield. And you have these scared parents. They're having a kid for the first time and they open a book and they start reading how to raise children. And I would argue that your natural instincts on what to do with your child are actually pretty good. It's funny, when my wife and I had our first baby, I remember, at the hospital, sorry, the first one was natural birth. At the birthing center, we went home and it was like, there you go, that's it. And we're like, what do we do? Where's the instruction manual? And you take them home. And then you relax and you realize, actually, instincts are pretty good. If the kid cries, check to see they're clean, feed them, all that. It's like your basic instincts are actually very, very good. And kids' instincts are actually very, very good. They know what they want, and they want things for a reason.
And they can encourage you to give it to them.
Yes, it's usually, children are not deficient adults who can't reason. And to some extent that's true, but mostly it's not true. Mostly they have very good reasons for what they want. And you as a parent mostly have communication problems with them. They can't yet communicate to you. You can't communicate to them. They can't communicate to you. So early on with my kids, I tried to focus on teaching them, basic explanatory theories, as opposed to having them memorize things.
That's just the most
yeah,
the most Naval solution.
No, but I'll give you a very simple example.
Right. Okay. So this is Twitter.
Yeah.
And
exactly,
this is the how to get rich without getting lucky thread.
Right.
So the first one.
Well, a simple one is, how does knowledge get created? If you follow the critical rationalism David Deutsch philosophy, then it's by guessing and then by testing your guesses. So whenever they ask me something like, well, why do you think that is? Well, how would we figure out if that's true, right? So that's a basic game you can play.
Involving them.
But another one is that a lot of the rules that you teach kids have to do with hygiene, right? You must brush your teeth, cover your mouth when you cough, clean up after yourself. Don't touch that. Wash your hands after you do this. Don't eat food off the floor, right? But all of these are subsumed under the germ theory of disease, right? So if you instead go on YouTube and show them videos of germs, or if you have them look under a microscope at anything, they're like,
they can infer what's going on.
Yeah, there's creepy crawlies everywhere, and I got to watch out for them. And then, you can talk about how if you look at humans, like, our real enemy are pathogens. I think a lot of aging and disease are actually downstream of our competition with pathogens over time, to a point that people still don't fully appreciate. There's a Red Queen hypothesis, which is that we undergo sexual selection to mix up our genes, and so every 20 years, every generation mix up your genes. But if you look at how bacteria and viruses mutate through just random mutations, their mix-up rate on their genes and evolution rate is roughly the same as ours, even though they go through thousands of generations, those 20 years, because they're not doing sexual selection, they're doing asexual replication and mutation. Their evolutionary rate is roughly equivalent to ours. So we're in a Red Queen race where we're both running at roughly the same speed using very different strategies. But a lot of how we're involved is around pathogens. Like our immune system is one of the most expensive things to run in the body. As so much is about immune system optimization. That's about pathogens. Junk DNA in bacteria and CRISPR was discovered because in bacteria, their DNA is evolved to fight viruses. And the way it does that is by taking viral DNA and snipping it up every time there's a viral attack and storing it in their own